Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, and this week we bless the upcoming new month, so I want to also say Chodesh Tov. And this week's Torah portion just has hidden in it one of the most remarkable teachings that you will only find in Judaism. And that is that in this week's teaching, we talk about God apologizing for a sin. Now, where does that notion even come from? God sinned? How does a God sin? And then God's apologizing for the sin. So in this week's Torah portion, we go through all the holidays and the sacrifices, the special sacrifices for the holidays, the additional the sacrifice you do on that day because it's a holiday. When it comes to Rosh Chodesh, it says over there that you should bring a bullock. And why the bullock? For a sin offering. Now, why would we bring a sin offering to celebrate a holiday? So one of the teachings our sages tell us is that God tells the Jewish people, please bring for me a sin offering because of what I did to the moon. Okay, let's back up a moment. In Genesis on Wednesday, the verse starts and says that God created two great luminaries. And then it says that God told the greater luminary to rule by day and the smaller luminary to rule by night. And the question is, we just said there was two great luminaries. They were both equally big. And the next verse, the next part of the verse immediately talks about a big one and a small one. So our sages tell us that the moon came before God and said, how can you have two kings over one kingdom? How can you have two central, the sun and me, both be the same? And God tells the moon, you're right. Lech tamiti, go and make yourself smaller. And here, God is asking us that when we celebrate the Rosh Chodesh, the birth of the new moon, which is what the Jewish calendar is built on, it's the lunar cycle, on that day, bring for me an atonement, a sin offering for what I did to the moon. Now, there's so much to understand here, and beyond the scope of this short sermon. However, first I want to take a moment and really allow us all to absorb what's going on here. God is telling us that he did what he did. And obviously he did it because he had to do it. And it was the right thing to do. And nevertheless, God is saying, but why did I do that to the moon? Just because it came with the right complaint, I punished it and said, you be the smaller one? Why? And the beauty of understanding, I've heard people talk about that in Judaism, the greatness is that our great sages, there's no problem. The Torah tells us that Moses sinned when he hit the rock. Whoa. We're not just talking about the Torah telling us that Moses sinned. We're talking about God telling us in the Torah that he sinned, and he's asking us to help him to have atonement. Now, I want to just share another one thought on this. What is really going on here? So I want to share with you a teaching in Kabbalah. Kabbalah asks, how could it be that man can sin? God is everything, everything is God. How does it come that there's rebellion? And Kabbalah says because in order for God to have a finite world vivified and sustained from the infinite light, God had a contraction. God told the infinite light to contract itself, to go into concealment and hiding, and only a finite ray should come forth. From there began the process of being able to have a dark side. The next step, Kabbalah says, is that when God told the moon, diminish your light, the illumination upon earth, that was the second process of the evolution in which sin can take place. And then that potential of human beings sinning solidified itself when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. Now, from this perspective, I'd like to take back a step and say that what really God is asking us to help him have atonement was that God created the potential of sin. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and share my own thoughts on the matter. So we are taught from the verse in Psalms, Magid Varav li Yaakov, Chukav Mishpatav li Yisrael. He said his words to Israel. He told us his statutes and his commandments, from which our sages say that God himself adheres to everything he told us to adhere to. Which leads me to a simple question. The verse says, Lifnei Ivor leisitein michshal. Before a blind man, one is not allowed to place a tumbling stone. Physically, practically, it means that you can't put something in front of a blind man to make him trip and fall. Our sages extrapolate from here that you cannot mislead people. You cannot put people in a place of making mistakes. You can't convince a person to sell you something when you know that you're really not giving him good advice. You can't put a person in a position of temptation where he may stumble and sin. So then how did God do that to us? How did God put us in a position of consistent temptation when he himself said you can't do that to a blind person? I was thinking about that when I was thinking about that by God saying that when he made the sun, the moon small, he sinned. I'm wondering if that's connected to what Kabbalah is saying, that is through how God allowed for a tumbling stone in front of the blind person, giving us temptation for sin. And then I think to myself, okay, but if God's saying it's a sin, then why did God do it? God is perfect. And I hypothesize, the verse says, before a blind man, do not place a tumbling stone. And I think what God is saying here is, I don't see you as blind people. I don't see you as weak people that cannot stand up to temptation. Quite the contrary. I give you temptation because you are stronger than that. And through temptation and overcoming temptation, you will grow and you will actualize hidden potentials I have placed within you and gifted you with. Okay? So if God is not giving us temptation as one puts a tumbling stone in front of a blind person, but rather God is telling us that he is giving us opportunities, then why is he asking us to bring a sin offering, an atonement? And I'm going to suggest that God is asking us, don't see yourself as blind people. Don't see yourself as weak. Don't see yourself as hopelessly and helplessly succumbing to temptation, because then you're putting me into a sin situation. So I'm asking you to bring the sin offering. The word karban comes from the word karov. See how close you are, karov. See how powerful you are, and understand that I did not create temptation, but opportunity. And hence, whether God sins or not really lies in our hands, in how we perceive ourselves. Weak, blind, falling to temptation, or, as I once heard a bat mitzvah boy telling his mother, when his mother was saying, come on, you got to study. And he said, don't worry, Mom, I got this. And that's what God wants us to say. Don't worry, God, we got this. We see the opportunity and not the temptation. Shabbat Shalom.